The theme we're going to talk about is, does the universe protect us? We all go out every day, we live our lives, we travel, we go through periods of risk, we go through periods of challenge, we have catastrophes, and then a lot of times we miss catastrophes. And the question comes about is, are we protected? Some may say yes, while others may say, well, no, it's just life happening. Both are right. So let's explore this question to see how much we can glean from what our reaction to life should be. Now, in this regard, I'd like to share with you some life experience-based events, and this will offer us a basis for addressing this question. So firstly, before I give you my own life experiences, in 2014, Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 crashed over the Ukraine, and all 298 people on board passed away. And this was a flight going from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. Now, so many serendipitous events surrounded this crash that were reported after the crash. One that I found quite interesting was a gentleman by the name of Barry and his wife Izzy. Barry and Izzy Sim, and this was on the BBC. They got to the airport in Amsterdam, and even though both of them had boarding passes, the flight had been overbooked and they only had one seat left. And so they had a choice to make. Do we get on board or do we switch? And they decided to switch to KLM, and therefore they averted disaster that day. What do we make of this situation? Like this couple, there were several others that did not make it onto this flight this day. There was another one I saw on BBC which talked about one of the stewards, I think it was called Surinder Singh, and he changed his shift with a fellow colleague, and that put him on this flight. And of course, the change was made at the last minute, a few hours before the flight. His colleague survived, he didn't. But the same gentleman, what was really interesting was, I think this accident occurred in July. In March, his wife, who was also an air hostess with Malaysian Airlines, and she was supposed to go on that flight which disappeared after takeoff. I think it was MH380 or something. And she had changed her calendar and her roster with another colleague. So in that case, she escaped that crash, her colleague. So she survived in March. In July, her husband, for exactly the same set of circumstances, does not make it. Now, something to think about, because serendipity occurs in so many ways. So here you have a couple, flight overbooked, they are both saved. The other case, you have the husband who passes away, and yet months before he is celebrating the fact that his wife escaped, the disaster. So things happen all the time, and we have to try and read into what is life telling us when these things happen. A very dear friend of mine, in 1983, he was flying from Toronto and they were going to Seoul. And he lands in Los Angeles for refueling, and he was on Korean Airlines, that flight 007. And he goes into the lounge, there's a bit of a delay, and he meets a friend he hasn't caught up with for a very long time. So the two meet up, they chat. And remember, this is 1983. Things were more relaxed in those days than they are now when it comes to travel. And they caught up and they talked for quite a while, and then they thought, well, there's such a long flight ahead. So his friend said, why don't you, switch to my flight? They checked with the agent, and the agent said, yes, we can. Your tickets are changeable. So he switches to Cathay Pacific, takes that flight. And the Korean Airlines flight that he was on was the one that got shot down when it strayed into Russian airspace. Now, From my perspective, I'm delighted that he was saved because he's a dear friend. But when we were talking about this experience, he was so grateful and he was so indebted to life that he had been saved from this situation. In his eyes, he had been protected. Now, sharing this with you because it's a real life situation that I encountered with a dear friend. Then, a few years back, I was traveling from Madrid to Dubai. And I had come on a fast train with Karima. We arrived in Madrid, and we were waiting to get the limo driver to show up and he could take us to the airport so we could catch our flight to Dubai. While I'm standing there, I have my wheel on with me, and I leave it on the ground, and the phone rings. And it's this driver, and he says, "I'm looking for you." And I said, "Where are you?" And so he says where he is, and without thinking, I start walking towards where I could find him. And when I found him, Karima joined, and we all got to the car. And as he was loading everything, Karima says to me, "Where's your wheel on?" And I had the shock of my life because both our passports were in my wheel on, with my computer, with everything. And now it's been almost 20 minutes. Madrid airport is not a safe airport. And I ran back, and I almost knew that bag would not be there. The wheel on would not be there. Right in the open, anyone can pick it. There's a computer in it. There's everything. When I got there, it was the most welcome sight ever to see that bag was exactly where I'd left it. Miraculous. I took it. That day we could travel because now we had our passports and everything. But I was so deeply grateful. And I thought to myself, I've spent my whole life, my whole career traveling, and for long periods I used to do 1 flight a week or 2. And so many times I've had situations where I could have lost my documents, I could have lost my passport, something could have gone horribly wrong, but it didn't. And today, losing this would have just canceled our flight, and then can you imagine trying to get a new passport and all? It would have been an incredible inconvenience with losing your computer as well. But there I was, protected. Didn't lose anything. And then I asked myself, how many thousands of times I have been in situations that I didn't even know where the catastrophe didn't happen. So I left that situation very deeply grateful, Now, that was one example. Another example was in 1989. I had gone to attend a meeting in Don Mills in Toronto. And the meeting went on till quite late in the evening. It must have been about 11 o'clock. And we lived in Oakville, which was a good 45, 50-minute drive on the Highway 401. So I get on the highway, driving away at 120 kilometers an hour. Everything's flowing well. And I'm in the fast lane. And then something, says to me, get out of the way. And I look in my view mirror and I see these lights coming towards my car quite fast. And the guy is right behind me. Something says, get out of the way. And I get out of the way. And as soon as I get out of the way, a little further on, before me, the traffic had come to a complete standstill. And this van that bolted past me went and crashed into the cars before them. It was a multi-car pileup. It was a disaster. And then, I stopped and I thought, wow, I could have been the one who would have hit the car in front. He would have hit me. Everything would have been a total disaster today. But I was saved. What was it that told me get out of the way? Was I protected? I believe I was. I believe I was. Now, like that, we have all witnessed accidents that we see happening before our eyes, which could have included us, but somehow we get spared. It's happened to all of us. We've all learned to call them near misses, in inverted commas. I had a near miss. Now think of all the near misses that you never even saw or weren't even aware of. They came to you, you weren't even aware of them, you were saved. You don't even realize that happened. And at any given moment in time, think about it, think about life. There are thousands of permutations where things can go horribly wrong for us, but they don't. And we carry on with life totally unaware of how lucky we are. Even we forget about the major near misses that we have been through. So here are some experiences that I've shared with you, that suggest to us that we could be protected. I, for one, believe we are. And each day I express deepest gratitude for all the things that could have gone wrong but didn't. That's always a prayer of mine at the end of my day. Thank you for seeing me through. And, all that could have gone wrong didn't happen. And I'm deeply grateful for that. I do that. And so but it works for me. And I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I'm sure some of you will resonate with that thinking. And any one of these events that I'm grateful didn't happen could have turned my life upside down and even alter the course of the rest of my life or the lives of generations to follow. In one of the webinars, I shared an example with you, and I'll sort of praise it very briefly today. And this story was about you standing at your wedding day with your loved one standing next to you. And the question is, and you're really happy, and the question is, when was this moment created? When was this moment of your wedding created? Was it created today? Was it created a few years ago or thousands of years ago? And according to this story, we take your ancestor who lived, for example, 1,000 years ago. And let's say he was a fisherman. And he goes fishing this day. He was young, goes fishing this day and gets carried away and doesn't realize that he has drifted off quite far into the deep sea. And at this point in time, a baby whale comes, swims past, jumps, and as it lands in the water, the tip of its tail hits his boat, and he's thrown off the boat. And now, he's looking for something to cling on, and he grabs onto this floating log. And he holds on to it for several days until it ends up on an island. Hungry, starving, not having had water, he gets onto the land and collapses. And then there's this young lady who is walking on the beach, sees him on the island, rescues him. And that great-great-grandfather of yours was rescued by this beautiful woman, young lady, who then becomes your great-great-grandmother. And she had come to this island because her family was trying to escape from a tyrant. And to be safe, they traveled through great danger. So many of them perished, but few of them made it to that island. And so her family was there. They rescued him. And there came about your great-great-great-grandmother and great-great-great-grandfather. After that, they had children who lived so many years, who then had children. All your ancestors lived with complete synchronicity. If any one thing had gone wrong, let's say that whale, instead of clipping his boat with the tip of its tail, had really clipped it with the full force of its tail, maybe your great-great-grandfather would not have survived. Maybe you wouldn't be here at your wedding. Or if that log had drifted and the wind had just shifted 1 degree, he would not have landed on that island. You would not be here today. So here you are today. Your perfect moment was crafted for you thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago and have defied all statistical odds to place you to where you are. So life transpires, life happens. And sometimes when we have been through so many near misses, and then suddenly something transpires and things go wrong, we can't do anything to change that. But prior to that, millions of adverse possibilities are averted or filtered, allowing the correct ones to happen. That's what placed you at your wedding day. So we cannot judge if something really does go wrong. Our number comes up. We are in that accident. We cannot judge whether the adversity that came to us was good or a bad thing, because we don't see the full picture of our karmic compass. And that's why earlier on someone raised a question, and I think it's a good time for you to visit the video on understanding karma, where you'll refresh your memories on the karmic compass and how you set your journey and now you're there experiencing it. So an adverse event that occurs could be a good thing for you and not always a bad thing. Now, each time I experience an adverse event, I always ask the question, what was I meant to learn from this event? Of course, I do that once the shock has subsided and I've calmed down. But what was I meant to learn from it? Now, I'll share a couple of instances from my own life experience as examples for us to reflect on that question. In 2010, I was involved in an industrial accident in Saudi Arabia, and my ankle was completely smashed. And I was rushed to emergency. They did the surgery, fixed my ankle, and said I would walk in 3 to 4 months, and 6 months later, my leg was double the size, and I couldn't walk. So I went to New York, where at the Hospital of Special Surgery, they said, we have to break this whole thing and start again. And so they rebuilt my ankle, and I almost spent 1.5 to 2 years between wheelchairs and crutches. Learned a lot. But then came the last procedure, where in a hospital with that caliber of HSS, the anesthesiologist, this operation was to remove all the hardware and to make sure that all the stem cells they had put in, the bone grafts they had put in, were all okay. So I go into the OR, I see the anesthesiologist, and I see a trainee with him. And the next thing I know, they've injected me and I passed out. But what the anesthesiologist had done was had put the needle past my durals right in. And as a result, I started bleeding in my spine. And I didn't know that. Nobody knew that. Surgery was good. Everything was fine. And they put me on morphine. And then they gave me these very powerful drugs. And my son said to me that these are narcotics. They're pretty strong, but you have to take them. And I said to myself, I'm not taking these drugs. And so I decided that I was going to work with the pain post-surgery. After I left the hospital, I was going to work with the pain with meditation. And I was able to reduce the impact of the pain. But then after 2 days, I was saying to Karim, I feel like something's very wrong with me. The lower half of my body, something's gone very wrong. And of course, if I had been drugged, I wouldn't have known that. We go back to the hospital and they say you've had a major spinal hematoma. Normally, your spinal fluid is completely clear. In my case, my whole spine was filled with blood. And I could feel like the impact was where my nerve sheets were damaged and there were electric shocks going everywhere. Normally, according to the specialist, he said like very few people survive this type of hematoma, 1 in 100,000 if you're lucky. I've never ever known pain like what I felt because I didn't realize that we have these high tension cables in our body, our nerves, that transmit such power. When the sheets are in place, we're okay. When they're gone, and they grow at a very slow pace, a millimeter or two per year. And I remember then they kept me in hospital for a month, and they had all these specialists because they realized they had screwed up and they wanted to make it right by me. And I'm grateful for that because the accident had happened. And, I remember that one time the specialist said to me, we cannot give you more medication because your liver is failing. So now you're going to have to handle this without any additional support, medical support. But we'll monitor you. And there I was again, relying on meditation. And if I can even give you a simple description, you've all seen those metal cannonballs when you go and visit the museum and you visit old historic sites. Cannonballs used to be fired as part of battle. You feel like someone launches a cannonball from the back of your head and it crashes in your forehead. And that repeatedly happens every few minutes. That's what I was going through. With God's grace, with blessings from meditation, plus lots of people around the world praying for me, very grateful for that, I managed to survive. Now, I ask myself, why did this happen? And this happened to me because of two things. One was that it gave me an opportunity to rely completely on meditation to carry me through what no medicines could, and where even you could not give me medicines because my liver was failing. So my strength in meditation grew. There was this amazing energy that helped. And the focus, when you're in pain, it's impossible to focus. But the way this focus came together, it really carried me through pains that would normally have knocked me unconscious. So one good thing happened. Some of the things that I learned in that period, I've actually shared with you when we do guided meditations and when we did the master classes. Some of the learning under a lot of distress, I've shared with you and will continue to share. The other was I had a first-hand experience of what chronic pain really is. Now, over the years, we've done a lot of work around the world helping people to heal themselves, teaching people to use meditation to heal themselves. But when that kind of pain visited me, I realized that when someone is in that excruciating pain, every minute for them feels like a lifetime. And you can't say to them, wait, I will see you tomorrow, or I'll meet up with you tomorrow. Even when I see people in hospital, in the emergency room, and they're in pain, I go back to that point going, wow, if anyone could just understand that for these guys, 1 minute or 2 minutes feels like a lifetime. And yet the doctors are doing their best before they can get to them. But that crucial nature of every minute sank in my head. It really transformed the way I approached, the self-healing, the teaching, where, I was more appreciative of exactly what people in cancer, in those painful situations are going through. So yes, I had a catastrophe. Yes, I spent almost 2 years in wheelchairs and crutches and all. But I asked myself, was it a bad thing? No. I was protected. I was protected through my journey of meditation. I was protected by everybody's prayers. And I was taught to understand pain and be very, very cognizant of it. So something good came out of that. And, I'm very grateful I survived, and therefore I'm here today with you to share that experience. So that was one example. And then I'll give you one more and then we can wrap up. But this was a few months back. Karima and I were traveling and we got robbed when we were in Spain. Now, a week prior, I was visiting Frankfurt and I didn't realize that where I had wandered off was a very dangerous area. So I left the hotel, I like to take my walk, and I just kept walking. And I had everything with me. Nobody touched me. I saw these people, and it was almost like I was invisible to them. Come back to the hotel, everything is fine. And then, little later, we're visiting Spain. We go to a major shopping center, and these two ladies, we're just getting out of the car, these two ladies approach us and say, oh, we need a job, we need help. And, I realized that something's very wrong here. So I said, we were just getting out of our car. So I decided to close the door and drive off. And one of them actually got into the car, put her hand on my neck, stole my watch. The other lady kept fighting with Karima. It was a terrible, terrible experience. And the watch that they stole had sentimental value for me. And when it all passed by, we went to the police station and the police guy was telling us that, look, this happens, there's gangs, there's groups here that do commit such crimes. Thank God that you did not fight back, because if you had, who knows whether a weapon would have been pulled out. So worst case, you lost something material, but you guys are physically safe. And I said, yes, thank God for that. But then he told us something else. He said that now remember, we living in Dubai, such a safe place. So we don't think about anyone coming to attack you and rob you or whatever, because everything is so safe, so you don't think about it. Almost live in that naive bubble. Now you're back in Europe and other countries where you can't afford to be that. Then he mentioned that, there has been waves of kidnapping of little children, infants. And, that hit Karima and me really hard, because we have grandchildren. Number of our family, little ones, love being with us, and often they are with us. And if we had taken them to a place like this, which is a normal place we would take them, we would have let them run around and do their thing like we did in Dubai, without realizing the sheer danger that they would have been in. And we both said to ourselves, thank God we were robbed. Thank God we learned this profound lesson that we're going to watch our children, our grandchildren and little ones who are with us, and not let them be the way we let them be in Dubai. We're going to be highly protective. So, was that robbery a bad thing? It wasn't fun when we went through it. It was a terrible experience. But I think we would never recover from losing a child to a kidnapping or anything like that. It would destroy our lives, to destroy anyone's lives. So if this was the school fees we had to pay, thank God for it. So, the way I look at it, we learned not to be naive. We learned that all the relaxed ways of ours, and despite the fact we've traveled all over the world, worked all over the world, we tend to forget. We get this sense of security. It's not there. You have to be vigilant. So in both these cases, there's a bad thing. At one level you would say yes, because it entailed pain, suffering, and shock. At another level, both these events I shared with you were gifts that taught me invaluable, powerful lessons that could help prevent heartbreaking and catastrophic experience in the future, for us and for others. So, in conclusion, from my perspective, even when adverse events do transpire, they bring an element of protection or learning that impacts you and actually positively impacts the lives of others. There's always something. We have to find why. We have to dig into it. We could stay angry, lamenting, being annoyed, seeking revenge or whatever it is, or we can ask ourselves why it happened, find the answer, use the answer, and move on. That's the choice we have always. And so, in conclusion, I'd like, for us all to continue to reflect on this question. Are we protected? If the answer is yes, please offer your deepest gratitude for each day of safety you are blessed with, because everything that could have gone horribly wrong for you didn't. And also, the next time you have a near miss, offer your deepest gratitude. Let your good luck live in your mind for longer than the next time you pick up the phone. Let that experience sit in your mind and realize how fortunate, how blessed you were to be saved from it. And don't just leave that moment, go into another one, and forget it ever happened. Now, once you begin to look out for all that is happening around you, you will develop a far deeper awareness through which you will begin to see every little occurrence. You'll start living a far more conscious life where you're consciously aware of life's experiences than you have been, far more. And remember, like I've said before in our webinars, there's a huge difference between looking and seeing. We all look, but not always see. It is easy to cast your eyes on something and, that is looking. But being consciously aware of what you're looking at and thinking about it and observing all the little things that go on around what you're looking at, that, my dear friends, is seeing. And for those who do not believe we are protected, that's fine too. Offer your gratitude anyway. And keep your eyes open to all the universes of things that are occurring around you. Start seeing from today, because that kind of wider and deeper awareness is truly a blessing indeed. So this is the insight I wanted to share with you today. And reflect on it, come up with your own conclusions, and I hope it's added a little bit of food for thought in how you approach crises when they do occur, and how you approach it when you nearly missed, and how you approach life realizing that thousands of things could have gone horribly wrong for you, but didn't. So the natural answer, at least for me, is gratitude.